me and Mrs. McWilliams, we built a house there in town, and since we had a little bit of money left over, we decided that we would install a burglar alarm. So I went down, talked to that burglar alarm feller. He come out, and he installed it and charged us $325. He told us that now we'd be able to sleep well knowing we were protected, and we did for about a month. And then one night we woke up smelling smoke. Well, I was standing on a landing there trying to figure out whether I should go downstairs to see where that smoke was coming from, and I looked down the hallway, and there coming out of one of them rooms was a burglar. And that burglar had a bag full of tinware he must have thought was sterling silver, and he was smoking a cigar. And I said, "Friend, you can't smoke in that room." And he said, "Well, I'm a stranger here. I can hardly be expected to know the rules of this house. And besides, I've been in much nicer houses than this, and nobody's ever told me I couldn't smoke before. I don't think those rules apply to burglars anyway." I said, "Well, that's some good points you had there, so go ahead and smoke. But I got to ask you how you got in here without setting off the burglar alarm." "I'm sorry, I didn't realize there was a burglar alarm. If I'd known that, I would have rung it." Well, at this point, I told that feller it was time for him to leave. And he told me that he was willing to leave, but since that tinware was already in his bag, he figured he was in possession of it, and so he was going to take it with him. Well, we had a bit of a negotiation, and ended up I bought that tinware back from him at pawn shop prices. And the next day I went down, talked to that feller, asked him about it, and he said, "Well, that burglar came in on the second floor. I'd only installed this thing on the first floor." So I had him come out and install on the second floor, and he charged me another $300. And then everything was fine until a couple months later I found a burglar up there on the third floor. Well, that burglar had used a big tall ladder to get up to the window, and he had to use it again to get out, and it was my ladder. So I was able to negotiate a highly discounted price for the stuff in his bag, and I called that feller in again, and he installed on the third floor, another $300. When he came out, he had installed so much stuff. I went down and looked at that control unit downstairs, and there was so many wires. There's probably 75 wires coming out of it to go to all these different sensors in the windows and the doors and the chimneys and so forth. And while he was there, he went ahead and installed this big old gong on the wall just above the headboard of our bed, so that if an alarm went off, we would be able to hear it. And then everything worked very well, except that the cook would come in every morning at 5 o'clock, and that alarm go off. It'd throw us across the room, and we hit the wall on the other side, and we'd slide down and lay there twitching like a couple of spiders on a hot stove. Well, when we finally quit twitching, we'd get up, and we'd be so wide awake we wouldn't even blink for 18 hours. We had a friend over once, had him over for dinner. Now, he wasn't in too good a shape to start with, and he died right there in the middle of the mashed potatoes. Well, it was kind of late, so we decided we would just clean him up a little bit and lay him on the bed there, and then go down to the funeral parlor in the morning. Well, 5 o'clock, that cook came out and threw that feller across the room. He got up, he was good as new. He was able to collect his life insurance and live happily ever after. Well, I'll tell you what, we went along for a while. Everything worked pretty well. We installed a little switch there so the cook could shut that off when she came in. I think it was probably 6 months before we had an alarm go off. We got woke up in the middle of the night. Me and Mrs. McWilliams, we both went downstairs, looked at that control unit, and it said nursery. That alarm was coming from the nursery. Well, Miss McWilliams fainted dead away. I got the shotgun. I went up and looked around. There was nothing going on in the nursery. There was not anybody anywhere. In fact, the window wasn't even open, at least until the shotgun accidentally went off and I blew a hole in it. And I called that feller in, and he fixed that window and charged us a pretty good penny for the privilege. And he told us that what we'd experienced was a false alarm. With all the vibrations and things in town and electrical things, he said we would experience false alarms once in a while. Well, they happen a lot more often than I thought. And I was very good at first. I would go down and see where that was coming from. If it was a false alarm, I would just pull that wire out of that control unit there. And after a few years of that, there wasn't any wires left going in that thing. And a burglars broke in, stole the burglar alarm. Well, I got you checking around to figure out what had happened. And I decided that I needed to go down, and I talked to that feller. I said, could you give me a refund or something? Because obviously it wasn't working. And he said, since we had modified the system, we voided the warranty and it wasn't any good anymore. But he said that was probably a good thing anyway, because we'd had that system for a couple of years and it was obsolete. What we really needed was the new high-tech version. It had these special springs on the sensors so it wouldn't have the false alarms. It had this special new clock that would turn that thing on and off without need for human intervention. So we had them install that at a prodigious price. And we figured out real quick that that was just a high-tech way of waking us up in the middle of the night. So, took a look, and I went downstairs and into the basement, and come to find out there was a nest of burglars staying in the basement. We hadn't had false alarms, it was actual alarms. Well, turns out they'd been there this whole time. I asked them about it, and they said, well, you see, since we had this special alarm system, our house had the reputation of being the safest place in America. And so the police didn't even come around anymore. It was the safest place for the burglars. So here all these years, we'd been maintaining this expensive system, and mainly for the benefit of the burglars. So I asked the burglars if they would help pay for it, and they refused. And we had a little negotiation there. It turns out I let them stay down there in exchange for maintaining the system. It worked out real well. And that went along for quite a while until one night we had a false alarm again. I went downstairs and those burglars had moved out. They were gone. And so was half the furniture in the house. They'd cleaned us out. Well, at that point, I knew that we needed to have some security. And so I sent a messenger out to that burglar alarm place. And when the door rang, I opened it up, and there was two of them burglars. They were wearing company uniforms. They said that they had decided to go straight. And I thought that was admirable. But then they said that they had actually bought the company with the proceeds from all the stuff they'd stolen from my house. And given that circumstance, they would be willing to do the repairs for a discount price. Well, I turned them down flat. I said, here we'd been maintaining this system all these years, and Miss McWilliams and I had said we had it. We decided we'd had it. So I ripped that thing out myself. I took it all out. That control unit, all them wires, probably 200 miles of copper wire and all them sensors and everything else, took it down to the pawn shop, and with the proceeds, I bought myself a guard dog. And that's the story of the McWilliams and the burglar.